I want to welcome everybody. We're so glad you're here today. And we have Grayson Chandler, the artist, here, and Catherine Anspon. We're so honored to have Grayson's work, and he's launching our artist S&S program, which just started this summer. And we hope to continue this every summer moving forward. The Artist S&S program, in short, is really just, it's an artist studio and then a solo. So it's like an artist in residence program, except they don't sleep, the artist doesn't stay here. But Grayson did move his full working studio to the gallery, and it's a wonderful opportunity for the public to come in and see how an artist really interacts and with his work, how he engages with it, how he plans the work way before he even starts to execute it on a canvas or on paper. So you get to see his actual thought process and how he engages and how he creates the work. So and we wanted this to also be an opportunity for like the University of Houston students to come in and who want to be artists and see a young artist who's met with such success so far already, having a solo at the Pearl Fincher Museum, being selected to be in a show in Doha, Qatar, and many other stellar opportunities that are coming his way also, in addition to my endorsement. And I'm very picky with who I work with, so I think Grayson is an artist that has great potential. So in any case, that's our artist. That's the solo, the artist studio part of the project, and that started on June 3rd. And then the solo is in the main gallery, and it's opening today. So it will welcome the opportunity also for curators to come in and see a vast amount of his work, both older works in the back gallery and how his work has evolved, see his studio, and then see his current work. So we're really excited about this program. It's a good thing to do in the summer. And we're so happy that Catherine has expressed an interest in Grayson's work. She's been following his work since the very first show we did in 2017 when he was still at university. And I'm really happy with Catherine's busy schedule that she can do the Q&A with Grayson. So without further ado, here's Catherine and Grayson.
Thank you so much, Deborah, for everything you do as a global ambassador from Houston. And I'm really thrilled this is your 5th year anniversary for being with the gallery. Remember your first exhibition.
Cheers.
And cheers, and now this is your 4th exhibition. And I'm also thrilled to have everyone here. It's hard to have Allison in the crowd because she's so brilliant, and it was like I'm going to embarrass Allison. And then we have Christian from the university who we've worked with on some projects, and he's been instrumental working with Deborah in the Hood Archive, and Allison, we're talking about the Dorothy Hood, that Allison curated Hood and Nevelson, and Mark Schindler, and Matt with VA, and I don't know everyone else, but I'm so happy we will know each other, and we'll know about Grayson's work, and just a couple of points and comments. We'll walk back and begin at the studio because that's where everything begins. And I think the idea of doing a studio in the gallery is innovative. I don't know how many times it's been done before, but it's unique. I mean, I'm thinking of Art Pace, a nonprofit, and I know the museum has their famous LaSalle program, Artists in Residence, but having a studio in a gallery, I've not seen that.
Well, it's better than the basement with Oscar underneath.
I love it. So that's really, that's great. So, we're just really excited to be here. And a couple points, I know Deborah spoke about Grayson's upcoming exhibition in Doha, and I know there's interest in Australia too. And also our Houston collectors have been hot on your trail. I know Lester's been here. Also Marilyn Oshman, who's so involved with the Menil in MFAH and Orange Show. She acquires, and also Dr. Gregory Shannon, who has an extraordinary collection and is very involved in the community. So, and we've had other collectors here today and a lot of interest. So I think without further ado, we do want to talk about some points, but let's go back to the studio. I remember your first exhibition, you made an impression as a contemporary surrealist. There was a nod to other countries there, but I also remember the surfaces. You were doing paintings, we'll see an example over there, but this is a big shift from painting to watercolor, and that's a shift that's not often made. I mean, artists do go, you're thinking of Winslow Homer, the watercolors. Artists that work exclusively in that, but to make that shift and to voyage into this new investigation. So why don't you, and where's yesterday when I was here, there were watercolors, and you literally had the water out here. So we may have cleaned up so people know.
You're seeing the watercolors.
The watercolors. And also, can you sort of go through what's on the desk? And I love, you have some, remarkable work here, but let's kind of go through and look at, this becomes like a city, and just how are you thinking of this? Or is this an incubation, and then what's up here? How do these function for you in terms of inspiration, what you're thinking about?
Yeah. So what you're seeing here, let's start with this. This is the beginning. There's hardly any thought involved. It's funny that you would say that a transition from oil to watercolor isn't something often done, but I found it was pretty seamless.
Interesting.
Because I think although the properties of oil and water are pretty different, if you work with them in a way that's wet, for lack of a better word, there's a lot more incidents that can be introduced, and that incidence can guide and flow from one point to another, and that helps me guide my eye.
So do you feel in watercolor there's more of an opportunity for spontaneity and for intuition, or?
I would say there's not more, but it does occur faster.
It occurs faster. Really, really, but very interesting. And then I think what's apparent here, but so interesting, we spoke yesterday about your, in terms of what you might be thinking about here, where you would like to go. Are these emblematic of which sort of area of the world? I mean, we talked about that, Bill.
Yeah, so it's not uncommon that I'll get some comments that say I have an Asian or Pacific influence aesthetic. And I wouldn't say that that's intentional, but I'm not gonna shy away from it if it appears. I don't exactly have plans to travel anywhere, but I wouldn't say no if the opportunity also arose. So if there's any residencies or grants you guys know of, don't hesitate to let me know.
It's interesting now. Are you thinking, because we were speaking just before everyone got here, the term the philosopher's rock, the stone.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I would say that's true in a number of these, the presence of that. So what does that signify for you? What are you thinking about that? Is that?
Well, it's it's a funny parallel to draw with the philosopher's stone, some sort of alchemical, for all intents and purposes, a magical thing. And abstraction kind of serves a similar function in that you can draw from a plethora of phenomenon and forms and ideas that you can then inject to a composition. But what I'm trying to really inject or distill really is a feeling for those forms, concepts, and phenomenon, so that you can kind of get this translation from something that's real, something and you can use that to assemble something that feels more foreign and novel.
And it's interesting. And then, so you're distilling the essence of possibly, are your forms rooted then in nature, the landscape?
Yeah, often. Well, at least for me, I find the nature and natural forms provide an excellent source of inspiration. But it's not uncommon that people say they see faces. But yeah, I mean, it's what you can kind of bring to the composition that helps to shape the composition.
Anthropomorphic now, in terms of these forms, are you working from a sketch, or I think we visited, they come to you, right? Or how do they provide these forms?
So that's kind of the purpose that these sort of serve, is that these can be material matter that can kind of springboard me into something that is more pronounced in a composition that may or may not arise later. So these are like studies. They're kind of low resolution attempts at articulating something that I'm feeling. And if I can, the more I can understand that feeling and give it definition, the better it helps me to bring that to a composition that has more gravity to it.
It's interesting now, this is another type of, what type of paper is this? This is
It's a Japanese paper.
the Japanese.
These are all lithographs here.
The lithos. We spoke a little bit about printmaking too. Is that something you had studied printmaking at the University University of North Texas, at a celebrated art school. And are you thinking about incorporating that again? I mean, I'm also the Asian printmaking tradition too. I mean, is that something which of these are prints? Are these are all the prints here?
Yeah, these are prints, and these are collages made from those prints. These are watercolors.
So you're trying out, different ideas, techniques. It's interesting. And then we have down here more work. And I think, I love the idea that you might find a treasure just sort of like underneath here. And I feel like I have to rescue some of these works and bring them up here for people to see. Do you want to hold this up so everyone can see? I think these world forms are such a vortex, and then there's a sense of, almost a cathedral here, a city, the forest. And do you feel, for you, we spoke a little bit about transcendentalism. Someone like Agnes Colton that's been, rediscovered, or maybe even parts of Georgia O'Keeffe. But are you seeking in nature? Do you have a feeling of it's animated by spirit? Here, let's hold that up.
Yeah, sure. And that's kind of funny enough how water and the oil act. They're sort of, they have an animating property about them, and that's where the incidence comes from. And that incidence, kind of, I think, draws a nice parallel in nature. It would sound mighty funny if someone were to look at a mountain range and say that looks wrong. It just sort of, it is what it is. And in that way it's beautiful. And so I think that animation provided by the water and the oil, it gives me some sort of tether to a more natural process.
The process, and then the process, there's a sense of movement here in all of these, and also, looking here, I mean, there's a feeling of transformation, and because of the medium, but because the way you work with the medium, and also in your other work with the oils. So do you ever spend a lot of time in nature, or these natural landscapes you've gone to in your mind, or a little bit of both maybe?
Well, we live in Houston, so there's not exactly geography here. But yeah, I certainly enjoy nature. I feel, at home, at peace with myself in nature. But yeah, you touched on movement, and they are in principle kinetic. I think that's how they feel. And so the title of the show, In Via, it's got this phonetic proximity to vive and vita, and so it has this connotation that it invites of life and passing and connection, and I think that's sort of what we're experimenting with here when we look at an abstract composition and we try to imprint ourselves on top of it.
We do that, and we're also talking about, I know Deborah's been so identified with, bringing back Dorothy and having that, and, you've looked at Dorothy's work. Maybe there's a subtle dialogue with that. And another artist is, who was abstract, surreal, color field, but, these are just labels that we put on that. Are you thinking about, and we also spoke about Virgil Grotfeld, or like who Deborah represents Virgil's work. Are you thinking about them in a subtle way? I mean, just...
I think that we have a different visual vocabulary, at least Dorothy and I.
Yes.
Virgil certainly gets closer in that respect. But they all touch on the same kind of feeling, that sort of underlying, universal consciousness. And so I think it reaches from the same place, and I think that's why you're getting sort of
that
similar
feeling. And going into these nature, their chambers. And then what is really interesting that was a revelation looking at your work yesterday, I was not familiar with the text, and these are poems that you have written to how do you think of the poems? Are they another side of the work, or?
Sure. They certainly they echo the same process, but just in a different medium. I look at them more as I pay more attention to the cadence, the rhythm, and the phonetic sound of it, more than I care to attach and fixate on what those words may mean in combination. But they're a sort of experiment into who, do you know Gertrude Stein?
Of course, yes.
So she, for the rest of the audience, she was a poet, and she kind of pioneered the genre of automatic writing. And what that would glean is that, regardless of how what your composition is or what your sentence says, we have a tendency to read it in the same way. We have, we need an object, we need an action, we need these sort of things that, that's how our interpretation works, I guess. That's the model of our environment sort of unfolding. And I think it's a good touchstone to focus on, because it helps kind of identify the same process that's unfolding here.
I think this is, I'll read it for the audience. Solitary sediment emerges, spirit surface serves as testament to virtue all its own, and then a vista has no eternity. And what's interesting also is not only is it text, but you've done this almost old Gothic script, which is, do you feel yourself pursuing this somehow we talked about doing an artist book or doing something, and then there's a whole, I know Deborah had done the word show years ago when the gallery first opened, and all the artists in art history that work with text, are you going to be pushing that at Brochet or?
I don't know. It all depends on, it's all still on the table.
And it's interesting, and then these are, and you have this, assertive font, and then these are your actual poems here, which I need my glasses to more fully read them, but right here. And these are, hermetic, but I'm so curious. So I really would like to, I think it could be really interesting to possibly do a pairing in maybe a printmaking or book technique.
Sure.
Yeah.
But so you said they kind of look hermetic.
Well, they do,
this is Gothic.
because I don't have my reading glasses, and they're extremely minuscule, and there's a sense that someone needs to have a magnifier to maybe a sense of revealing somebody. You're challenging the viewer to be interested and come closer.
Oh, yeah. I would say that the primary function is to endow this space here with an aesthetic that it's like apothecarical. It's old. It's not necessarily important what's written on it, just that something's written over there. So I feel like that kind of gives it this vibe of it's old, it's ancient, and if you'll refer back to the Gothic text or some of the titles of my name are in Latin and Greek, and I really respond to that connotation that it brings. It's someplace that's old and maybe worthy of being rediscovered.
And it's interesting, and are you thinking, also with the Asian art history, these are going back centuries, and then contemporary artists requote from the other times. So are you thinking about centuries?
Yeah, I mean, it's a long-term mentality. This is it's an ancient profession.
The whole thing, and then this looks like an ikebana sort of setup here. And then this one little stem. I think when we go in the next room, we'll find it mirrored in one of your watercolors. But what are you, and in the poem here, what are you kind of making an ikebana quote? What are you thinking about?
I not intentionally. So that's probably a good example of what you're kind of bringing to the composition.
And it's also so interesting. I mean, I could see you. This wall is an installation. I can see that we are in the middle of an installation, and with this, and it feels so rich, and like we've kind of entered your mind too. And another question: have you ever thought about doing a wall drawing with something?
Sure. I mean, I've imagined a lot of things, and now I'm imagining that.
And then there are other forms that we, I know we spoke about kind of being, very specific. Now, is this fungus or a flower, or you want the viewer to decide, or what are you thinking of that?
Yeah, I'm inclined to not exactly reveal
Yes.
what it may or may not be, but it probably already looks like something to you, and that's a good place to use as a springboard to follow the rest of the composition.
We talked about, really, do you want the viewer to do some work and?
Yeah, ideally I don't have to take responsibility.
You want the viewer to bring what they know, experiences, connections with nature, and do that. And I think it's so interesting that this is work that's in Houston with the long history of our museums, but surrealism here, Asia Society, the MFA's interest in contemporary, but also with world cultures, and just really fascinating. So, who has questions for Grayson with the studio? Matt, Mark.
On the heels of what you were just saying about what you read into something, titles. I was looking at title,
Yes.
right? As part of the artwork, to me,
Yes.
the title is part of an artwork. Can you tell us about how you develop your titles?
Yeah, it's a pretty short answer. It may not be that satisfying, but it really I just get a feeling. It might be based on the color, it might be based on some form or another that maybe this feels metamorphic, or maybe this feels atmospheric, and just let the sort of words come to me. And
So it does inform the artwork.
certainly, and the artwork informs the title too.
So Catherine, what's the title of that piece?
What is the title?
Which one?
Up here.
This one. That's Mandala.
And so it is, and it's slightly irregular, but I don't know if it's flower or fungi, but we're let in there, and this is Mayan, but there are a lot of, I think and there's translucency, but opaque, and also your work, you're able to, besides movement, there's depth.
Yeah. There's certainly a space.
There's the space for us to enter and go in.
Right. That really resonates with me, because I read these like a landscape far before you're seeing the final product. And so that helps me kind of feel like I'm in it, I can discover it, I can navigate, and it helps me sort of orient myself throughout the rest of the
Go in,
compositions.
and then this feels, it's a sense of, you know, as a viewer, looking into almost like you're looking into this, an algae-filled lake, where you're going in here and you know you'll be able to get into that environment, but it feels like aqueous water. And then others, you know, they do have that sense, as well as being watercolors. And I know over in the other room, we have more of the, you know, the celestial feeling. Are you thinking about sea and sky or sea and cosmos?
I think of it more as those emerge, and I see them and then choose whether or not to embellish them.
Okay. With that. So interesting. Now, Mark, you had a question, or
Yeah,
then Allison.
I love all the layers, and you know, for me it evokes kind of fantasy and surrealism and whatnot. Can you tell me a little bit about you know, what you're influenced by, and a little bit more about your process, just kind of in general?
Sure. When I was really young, I adored Dr. Seuss, and the visual aids in those books are, you know, there's this loose representation of some reality that we know and we're familiar with, but it's also very uncanny. And I think in my work, it has that same vibe, and that uncanniness, which can begin as a certain feeling of unease, maybe it's a little unsettling, but if you're okay to sort of drift in that space, I think that uncanniness can become familiar. And so then there's this dynamic where you're pushing and pulling something that feels familiar but begins to unravel, or you're having the inverse of that, something that's too obscure to really put your finger on, but the more you can kind of sit in it, the more you can kind of glean this familiarity from it.
Interesting. And then Allison?
I'm also thinking of, I see affinities with your work and Darren Waterson's.
Yeah, that's my favorite artist.
Oh, does everyone know Darren's? I know he's in the MFAH collection, and is on view and shows at Carrie's. Yeah.
And he's based in New York and working in the Hudson Valley. Now, originally, I think he was working on the West Coast, in the Pacific Northwest. But there seems to be a certain, you know, permission that you're taking from Darren's example. And would it be fair to say almost like a homage in certain instances?
Absolutely.
Like, for example, the monochrome frame almost looks like a quotation of some of his work.
That's very flattering.
Oh, but so that's I think fascinating to point that out. And I was curious in terms of like a group exhibition. What are you showing Grayson's work with in Doha in terms of being placed in another group exhibition?
Yeah.
Have
the curators, it was a Texas and Qatari show. It's going to be a little reinvented because it was supposed to open October of 2020, and I probably don't have to say too much more than that. And the University of Houston master's graduate that co-curated the exhibition with me moved back to Doha now.
Oh, wow.
And we're going to kind of do it a little bit differently. But James Searles is in the exhibition, Dorothy Hood, a huge Dorothy Hood we were going to bring over. And then Burt Long, some of his very surreal.
His surreal birds, yeah.
And Andre Montoya. And then a few Qatari artists. We're probably Virgil Rothfeld. But you know, now they've given me the opportunity to curate it myself, and I'm going to work on that in August. And it will the space is still, it's a beautiful nonprofit space, in downtown Doha. And they've reserved the time for it. And we're basically gonna do a very similar show, but it might just be a slight little bit different. But I know that Burt Long and Grayson and Dorothy Hood will definitely be in it, and most likely Virgil. James was very excited about the show, and they had the budget to fly everybody over and host them. But we'll have to see if James is interested, 3 years later, so we'll have to.
And what time of year is that again? Is it
The name of the show is Akin.
Akin and
It was in Arabic, the title was in Arabic writing, and it's showing similarities between the open, vast landscape of Doha and this region of Texas.
this is fascinating.
And how that influenced the artists.
Now what time is that opening next spring or?
It will be the fall of 2023.
That's interesting. Well, Grayson, you're gonna have to go over to.
Yeah, they have the budget and everything already. I'm hoping that James will still want to go. It's a long trip and he has a bad back a little bit, but we got clearance for his wife to be able to come also. So
Well, I think I know James is doing that big project for, in Splendora with Diverse Works, that wildlife show coming up. And I think it's sometime next year, maybe with one of his birthdays. I don't know if it's 75 or something like that. Yeah, that's interesting.
The American Guitar Association out of Washington D.C. is they've come to the gallery and did a visit with Grayson and saw a lot of his work, and they're interested in his maybe doing a residency there.
Oh, wow.
It would be a different project
Yes.
than this show, but they want him to apply for that. So we haven't had a chance to visit on that yet because we've been focusing on this exhibition, but that is something that.
Well, you spoke about a residency. Here you go. It seems to appear well perfect. Are there any more questions here that we're going to walk to the other gallery across right over here then? Any more questions or? I'm looking at. This is from
2016.
2016. So from before you had
Before my first show here, yeah.
And talk about a portal. What are you thinking about? Is it something kind of utopian? This seems really utopian. What are you thinking about, Grayson?
I don't know about Utopia. The name is Lush Decay, and there again is that sort of
Yes.
dynamic,
Yes.
like sort of, they seem to be diametrically opposed.
I think is quite an extraordinary title. And there's such a sense of an idealized environment. In a strange way, it makes me think of a parallel. There's an American 19th century painting, I think it's by Thomas Cole, where he does the goblet. And it's a large goblet and little boats floating in it. But it has that's more specific, but this has a sense of, a fantasy. And it's also slightly very 19th century. I'm thinking of sort of Mark Johnson Heaton hummingbirds for some reason. I don't know why this painting takes me there, but it's what you want to do with the viewer. I mean, everyone, I don't know who else, what do other people see in this? Christian, what do you see?
Yeah, very much like that. Yeah, it's sort of, to me, it's the extraterrestrials, environment. Yeah, for sure.
It's interesting, that almost seems like another planet.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a sense, I think many of us now are thinking, well, we're going to Mars. What is that going to look like?
Yeah.
Are we going to be able to colonize Mars? And will there be these areas that are, and then with these new nebula discoveries, will there be an environment like this where we can colonize it, or,
Yeah, I mean that invites what is this made of? What kind of atmosphere is this? And those have geological properties. What's the sediment like? What's the air pressure.
And this looks like, some sort of like a windstorm up here. I mean, I don't feel like it's Mars, but it could be something that's another planet in another galaxy or.
Yeah, I think it's also worth noting that, it's difficult to ascertain what scale it's actually representing. It could be large, it could be small, but like the K, it's this sort of superposition between one thing and another that opens up this space for contrast.
So interesting, it could be a terrarium-sized environment, or it could be vast and truly cosmic.
What was the name of that environment they had in Arizona? It was like the biodome or something.
Oh yes, I know that. That one from the 70s. I was fascinated by that.
That was like supposed to be a perfect self-sustaining environment that became completely toxic, as well as the relationships with the people.
And the
working
people
there.
were trying to get out of there, right? They were there for like a year and a half, and they had to.
They were like,
And this has that feeling. And then we've also talked about, how do we prevent Houston from flooding? We're going to put a big dome around it. I mean, it has all these ideas. It's strange, but that 70s time with the environmental movement, people did, such futuristic ideas. It's so fascinating. Were you going to say something now?
Yeah,
I think
I love this correlation.
Yeah. And I'm thinking this is very much that environment. It does feel. Were you aware of that project, Grayson? Or?
Oh, well, I was definitely trying to make it feel like it's an ecosystem that's becoming, but also unbecoming. So there's, all the colors are muted. There's not a lot of light, and what light there is, it's very ambient. So there is this sense of an ecosystem, but it's kind of hard to determine whether it's coming or going.
Right, and everything, and you wonder what people always posit, what's going to happen? Are the plants going to take over? I mean, are plants going to take over, or then I think, or is it decaying? Or and then I had watched Blade Runner recently again, and it's oddly, it's so now in a way. So then it's really so now, and this makes me feel like a Blade Runner scene in the countryside somehow. Like that. It's so great. Well, let's look over here. This was, I thought, was such a touchstone piece, and then these almost seem like an O'Keefe's son or something. And then you're also putting, are these drops? What are these gray surfaces here on this watercolor?
So let's start with the title. This thing is Libra, and that's an astrological sign. So there's a certain connotation that's brought. It's dark. It's kind of lacy. It's moody, but there's also a nice tactility with these dots those are made of acrylic, just stamped on. And so you have this open space, but then it's pretty dramatically contrasted by this, actual tactility that occupies a real space rather than just a picture plane.
You come back to that, and then what is this light emerging here? Is this a spirit, a mist? What is that?
Could be.
I hadn't noticed it yesterday, but now it's I definitely feel the presence, and then it's almost like becomes a drawing on here, and it's that line also makes me think of your ikebana arrangement where there's that one slender twig. It's a little bit thicker than a human hair, and you're and then I'm thinking, all of a sudden this becomes a drawing in the middle of the watercolor.
I mean, and it kind of gives you something to drape your eyes across while you're sort of traversing this space. And like you're kind of helping draw the whole thing. That's what your eyes are doing across it.
And then these are, when I hadn't thought of the Dr. Seuss, but when you mentioned it, there are always these vertical environments in a sense of, these castles or fantastic architecture or landscape, but this becomes so elegant, and there's such a sense of something about to happen here.
Yeah.
Is this going to stay or is it going to? It's slightly.
You're coming in media res.
Yes, yes. I mean, and it's precarious. I mean, I don't want to be kind of hanging on down here somehow. It's, you know, and then this is, what is the sun? Is it another planet? What?
Could be.
Could be. Well, and then we're going to get back. What dates are these?
These are right before my 2009 exhibit called Cocoon. So probably 2018, 2019.
And then can you read everyone the titles? We'll go from
Left to right. This is Exudate.
What is it again?
Exudate.
Exit date.
No, Exudate. EXUDATE.
Okay.
This is Genesis, and this here is Chrysalis.
Okay. So what is, and then these surfaces are extremely moody. We're still able to enter. And these almost feel like they're on panel, but are they on canvas?
No, these are on panel.
They're on panel.
On panel, yes.
And then, so do you prefer working on panel or canvas?
It just depends on what kind of tooth you want to work with.
Yes.
I like to glaze, so I like to add layer after layer, and with less tooth, which you get from wood panel, you know, that I feel like that helps encourage that optical mixing and that, you know, depth you can get.
Well, they become very alchemical with the panel, and you know, with panel paintings, you always think back to, you know, sort of the earlier Renaissance, and they do become quite alchemical in how you're working. And then this shade of green, it's a Grayson green. I'm going to say that it's kind of has a jade, but jungle, oceanic, but murky. And is that, I mean, I've seen that, you know, over here with the touch of blue. I mean, is that a place you've been in your mind? What do you, I mean,
Probably at one time or another. You'll probably see that I'm not still in that place if I ever was with the addition of my new work.
yeah, you've gone on to, and are there any more questions in this room? And then I think we should look at the new work. Anyone have any questions? Okay, yeah. You know, some of these are, this to me is possibly a philosopher's stone or winged to Virgil broadfelt, or both of these, but it's also, you know, this beautiful blue gray, and then you doing this, and also you have this where the negative space becomes another part of the watercolor. Now, do you like to? And again, here, this beautiful sense of space. And I think being able to do both of these, and then this is almost a cosmology, a city observed from air. How are you jumping back and forth in your mind between a really dense environment and something where, what do you want the viewer to see this as? Is this air? Are we looking down from the plane? What is this?
Okay, well, without giving too much of my own sensibility away, you can tell by there's not a whole lot of color used except for these splashes, so color is kind of sparse. It's mostly light value except for these dark spots. So there's a feeling of uplifting, kind of atmospheric, low gravity sensibilities. So I think that, yeah, I've noticed that in the piece. I resonate with it, and so I keep, you know, trudging along with that.
And this is the first one where I felt that we were getting, you know, sort of a looking down an aerial view, where these could be a very abstracted idea of, you know, fields, mountains, but in a way that's subtle. And then these stipples here, they seem topographic, something observed from the.
Yeah, so I mean, it's a sort of juxtaposition between something that you're inside and something that you're viewing.
Yeah.
You know, much like the actual painting.
It's so interesting, and we talked about also, I think, these being metaphors to your work for states of being. Are you thinking about are there different psychological states reflected here?
Yeah, I mean, I would leave that more up to the viewer, but I think that the works tend to encourage that, or at least that point of view.
So interesting. Let's go. And then this is, you boldly jumped into this rosy pink. I think this is another idea that you're trying out. And this is another, these are orbs and a sense of joy and also vegetation.
Yeah, vegetation would certainly seem to be the way I came to it as well. The title is called Lotus. So lotus, it's an aqueous plant. It grows underwater until it emerges. So it was something that felt like it was rising, and that sort of upward surge, in addition to its biomorphic forms, I thought Lotus was a fitting title.
For the fitting, and this to me, if again commenting, there's some of these which I think you're able to move the viewer around to different states of being. I mean, this feels like it was done probably in an afternoon. I mean, some paintings just are nocturnal. I mean, I think for example with Dorothy Hood, so many of her deep blue paintings, they feel like they were done at night in her studio. And these, I would say, these were they feel like they were painted during the day. I mean, it's not just obvious that it's, a completely deep background, but there's something, this becomes, another state of being inside. And how deftly you transport us around to, and then this again is, you have these blossom forms here that you kind of pulled in the watercolor, but it's also like, we don't know the scale. It becomes, we're moved around there. Are we looking at a flower? Or these nebulas? I think you have anticipated some sort of cosmic activity. The nebulas, are you ever looking at NASA images too? Or are you curious about that?
Sure. Yeah, space is fascinating and terrifying.
Yeah.
And that I think that's a decent metaphor for these compositions.
And going in, I think what can be terrifying is when you're on the beach at night and you're looking at the stars, but you shine a flashlight and it keeps going and you feel like you don't know when it's going to end. And these nebulas it doesn't end. And I think the work you're going into, I know that was one of the text phrases. I feel like you're taking us into these worlds, you're beckoning us, and the worlds, they do not have an end, which we don't want there to be an end. So I think this is now, anyone have questions? So, I love this. And Deborah?
Yeah, I just wanted to add that one of the most outstanding features, I think, of Grayson's work is that we can all feel something familiar when we look at it, but then there's something very unfamiliar and undefined, and we all, art is subjective, and we all process it the way in which our own grid and mind works. And I like that Grayson, there's a certain sensibility that everybody would probably uniformly generally get from it, but that he refuses to really define what the work is, and he lets the viewer decide how they feel about it.
It becomes an open road, and
Yeah.
I think when a work is really great, it's like listening to an album. You discover depths, other notes, other asides, something, a poem, you return to it, and maybe when we change and grow, we can find more aspects based on our own perceptions. And there are many aspects here. And having been yesterday, I found some other aspects just in our, I'm looking down here and I'm seeing it seems like a city rising. So there are many aspects, and I think the aspects change as we change.
Yeah.
And that's,
You can think of it as like the sort of circumference of your experience is expanding, and as that does, there's more you can find inside of it, and the more you can find inside of it, the more you can find in there.
the aspects. So you've taken us on the on the road today.
Yep.
So thank you. Are there any more questions?
What kind of music are you listening to?
Yeah.
That's a trade secret.
Well, Allison's asking, so you have to give a hint.
Okay. It's a litany of many things, but I'd say the greatest factor is how often do I have to change the song. So I'll put on something really long, and so that might be classical music, that might just be one guitar or one piano, something that I don't have to make any decisions since I'm already making so many.
Yeah.
But you do listen to music then when you.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Well, and it's interesting you asked about music. I was thinking about your refusal sort of to define the works is something that the filmmaker David Lynch does, and that made me think, kind of see a little bit of that, in the works as well, that Lynchian kind of feeling. So,
Good.
Yeah, fascinating.
So Grayson, is the objective of the pieces to have the viewer begin to come in contact with themselves?
Yeah, I mean, sort of the at the core of this whole kind of thing is it's about agency and self-awareness. It's I'm trying to embolden this conversation that we're already having with ourselves, and the more you can kind of parse that conversation, the more you can get from not only these works but your sort of experience in a greater scope.
It's a metamorphosis, really, or becoming more self-actualized.
Yeah, a meditation
Yeah.
and for the purpose of changing or understanding how you're changing.
Okay, that dovetails to common question for artists that have this kind of trajectory so far. What's next?
Just keep going down the road. Follow that road, man.
Okay.
Residency, maybe.
Sure.
Yeah, I think
I love
Grayson's
one.
been so, he's such a practical artist that he really focuses on what he's doing now. So I think Grayson has been so
Yeah.
intent on this work and diving deep within himself to create it that he hasn't really been, self-promoting or trying to think about what he'll be doing or anything. He's
In
an
the
artist.
trenches.
Yeah.
He's an artist that just focuses very deeply on his work. And I think when you're true and pure like that opportunities prevail and lots of wonderful things happen.
Thank you, Deborah.
It doesn't hurt to answer the phone now.
Yeah, so you can see it's Allison and Long.
Well said. Well, this is, we're very inspired, and you've taken us on voyages, and our imagination, I think everyone has really gone different places today, and we loved having everyone here, and just this core group of extraordinary people that we get to be, all together at this time in the planet and time and space, a slightly challenging time, but we're all together, and art and science will save the planet. Otherwise, we'll have to go on to Mars, I guess we say that. So, anyway, thank you, Deborah, for making this possible and your really cool studio residency, and thank you, Grayson, for, pushing the work and taking us to new places, and the journey continues, right?
Yeah, surely does.
And thank you, Catherine. A special thank you to Lauren Rocha for her excellent filming techniques and such, and for everyone who has been supportive of Grayson over the years. And, we continue to get more people engaged in his work, and it's been a real privilege to see him evolve the past several years. I think I'd like to thank his parents too. They, you know, more people should have great parents like his. They've really been outstanding.
Oh, wow. I thought you looked familiar, and then I thought, oh, this is because we met at Grayson's first show. Yeah. It all starts with the parents, and you all are so young. I was like, wow. So, there you go.
Yeah, Gary introduced, this is Grayson's father, he introduced me to Grayson's work when Grayson was still at high school at Lamar, getting art awards there. And so it's.
Well, we worked together on several.
I remember
my
projects,
right?
yeah.
And so we had a relationship already. And he was doing well at Lamar, and so I just approached Deborah and said, hey, you have, need your floor swept or anything like that. You got a guy.
Well, I
I got two hands.
Grayson was an intern to start out with and did a very dedicated job as being an intern. And I said, hey, I'd like to see your work. And it was like, wow, So one good thing leads to another. But that goes back to how Grayson focuses on what he's doing and doesn't try to make it into something else. When he was an intern, he was an outstanding intern supporting all my artists and not, trying to make opportunities for himself. And when I saw how his work had evolved, I just said, wow, this is a really talented artist. And I like that he's so internally focused and on what he does and so pragmatic. I think Grayson has all the skills for great success in addition to much intellect and talent.
Thank you very much. Thanks everyone for coming.
Thank you.